Radicular skeleton, starting with the pectoral girdle and the upper limbs, followed by the pelvic girdle and the lower limbs. The bones of the limbs and their girdles, so the pectoral girdle is the upper limbs, the body trunk, pelvic, the lower. The pectoral girdle or the shoulder girdle consists of clavicles in the front and scapula in the back. Attach the upper limbs to the axial skeleton. They provide the attachment sites for muscles that move upper limbs, and they offer a great deal of mobility because the scapula are not attached to the axial skeleton. And the socket of the shoulder joint, which is a ball and socket joint we'll see next week, is very shallow, so it doesn't restrict movement.
The pectoral girdle refers to the bony arch formed by the clavicle and the scapula. The primary function of the pectoral girdle is to act as an attachment point for the muscles that provide arm movement at the shoulder joint. It also provides the only connection between the arm and the axial skeleton.
Okay. The clavicles are also called the collarbone bones. They are S-shaped. The sternal end articulates with the sternum. The flattened acromonial end articulates with the scapula. And they anchor muscles and act as a brace to hold the scapula and arms out laterally. There is a difference between the right and left clavicles. They are mirror images of each other. The scapula, also called shoulder blades, they are very thin, triangular bones on the dorsal surface of the rib cage between ribs 2 and 7. Each one has 3 borders: the superior, which is the shortest, sharpest border; the medial, which is towards the vertebrae; and the lateral, which is toward the axillary region near the armpit; and superior in the glenoid cavity fossa, which is part of the shoulder joint. Each scapula has 3 angles where those borders meet: the superior, lateral, and inferior. Each of those. They feature spine, which is a prominent ridge in the back; an acromonium, which is the lateral projection going to articulate with the acromial end of the clavicle, forming the acromioclavicular joint. There is also the coracoid process, which is the anterior projection that anchors the bicep muscle of the arm; the suprascapular notch, which is an opening for nerves; and several large fossae that are named according to their location. In the arm, we have approximately 30 bones. The arm itself is the humerus, so everything from your shoulder to your elbow is what we anatomically refer to as arm. Below that is the forearm. The forearm contains the radius and the ulna. In our hand, we have 8 carpal bones in the wrist, 5 metacarpal bones that form our palm, and 14 phalanges that become our fingers. Humerus, only bone of the arm, largest and longest bone of the upper limb, articulates above with the glenoid cavity of the scapula, and inferiorly it makes an articulation with both the radius and the ulna. It's got a head, which is the proximal end that fits into the glenoid cavity. The anatomical neck is a slight constriction just below the head. The greater tubercle is separated from the lesser tubercle by the intertubicular sulcus, which is an attachment point for rotator cuff muscles. And the surgical neck is the most frequently fractured part of the humerus. The deltoid tuberosity is about midway down the shaft where the deltoid muscle attaches. The radial groove carries a radial nerve. The trochlea is a distal hourglass-shaped condyle. The capitulum is the distal ball-shaped condyle. The medial and the lateral epicondyles are points of muscle attachment. The medial and lateral superior condyle ridges, and the fossa would include the coronoid, olecranon, and radial. All those features are pointed out here, and you'll get a chance to look at them more closely in the lab. In the forearm, there are two parallel bones, the ulnar and the radius. The proximal ends are going to each articulate with the humerus as well as with each other. The distal ends are going to articulate with each other at the radio-ulnar joint, and between those bones is a structure called the interosseous membrane that connects them along their entire length. The ulna is the medial bone in the forearm, forms a major portion of the elbow joint with the humerus. It's got an olecranon and coronoid process, which grip the trochlea of the humerus, forming a hinge joint. Those are separated by the trochlear notch. Radial notch is going to articulate with the head of the radius. The ulnar head is a knob-like distal portion, and here's one of those styloid processes I mentioned in the first lecture. The ulna styloid process is a ligament attachment site. The radius is the lateral bone in the forearm. It's got a head, which is round. A radial tuberosity anchors the bicep. The ulnar notch articulates with the ulna. And this also has a styloid process, the radial styloid process. And here they are shown, along with that intraosseous membrane. Cole's fracture is a break in the distal end of the radius, and it tends to be a common fracture. It occurs when someone tries to break their fall with an outstretched hand. The bones of the hand include the carpus, metacarpus, and phalanges. The carpus, which make up the wrist, are 8 bones in 2 rows. The proximal row is the from lateral to medial would be the scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, and pisiform. The distal row, lateral to medial, is the trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate bones. Only the scaphoid, lunate, and triquetrum are part of the wrist joint. The metacarpus forms the palm, and there are 5 metacarpal bones, 1 through 5, starting with the thumb. Their bases articulate with carpals, and the heads articulate with the proximal phalanges. The phalanges, or phalanx, are the fingers, digits. They're numbered 1 through 4, starting with the thumb. The thumb does have a special name. It's called the pollex. And the pollex, has only 2 bones. There's no middle phalange. The rest of the phalanges have 3 bones, a distal, medial, or middle, and proximal phalanx. Median nerve and tendons travel through a structure known as the carpal tunnel, which is formed by ligaments through the wrist. And carpal tunnel syndrome can occur from overuse and inflammation of those tendons, which compresses the median nerve, causing tingling and numbness. Which brings us to the pelvic girdle, where I am going to stop again.